Okay, great. So I don't have to worry about that. Yeah, mate, I'm fantastic. I'm top of the morning. Well, it's evening now. It's afternoon. Just been for a swim down at Bondi.
Is that right?
Life is fantastic at the moment.
Did did you swim in the pool at Bondi?
No, in the ocean.
There's that fabulous 100-meter swimming pool near Bondi that I
Icebergs.
swam in once. What's it called?
Icebergs. Bondi
Icebergs.
icebergs.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
My wife's a swimming
Yeah,
member there.
it's almost as nice as the Sea Point Pavilion, which I go to every Friday morning
Okay. Where are
in
you living in Cape Town?
in summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm still here.
Whereabouts?
I'm still here. Last man standing.
Whereabouts in Cape Town?
I'll be. We live in Constantia. We bought a place here in 1987, which we're still in. You know, it's changed substantially as the family got bigger,
Yeah.
and as the family's going to be getting smaller, most of the family are still living with us. So we actually need a
Same.
sizable house.
Yeah. I'm in a 6 bedroom house. I've got two of my three kids still live here. And
Is that right?
yeah, and one of them has got her boyfriend. My daughter's got her boyfriend living with us. And
Yeah.
I've got two lodgers because we just didn't want to, this we just wanted to, we just like it here. And it's, I didn't
Where are you? Where do you live?
it's a place called Dover Heights. It's, if you know Bondi, if you on the left hand, if you
Yeah.
look at Bondi Beach, on the right is the icebergs. On the left, it goes up to some cliffs, and those cliffs run through to
Yes.
the entrance of the harbor. That's suburb on top of the hill.
Okay.
That's called Dover Heights. So I'm up there,
Okay.
and it's about just over a kilometer
Okay.
out to the beach from my place. So
All right.
uh,
Well, yeah, I sort of know that. I've been to Sydney a few times. You know,
hmm.
my brother Richard is in Sydney,
Yes,
and
I
and
see him quite often.
I'm actually. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly at the old
He's
boys things and you know around
yeah.
the traps.
He's turning. He's going to be 70 in November, so we're thinking that we'll probably come over for a jaw. You know,
You
and
must
spend a bit of time
you must look me up.
in and around Sydney.
That Bondi icebergs that you mentioned, there's a clubhouse next to it, and we're members there, and it's just magic to sit up and have a beer up on that balcony and overlook the beach. It's like amazing, and it's just an ordinary club. It's not a fancy place. There's a on the top story. There's a very very fancy, expensive restaurant. But on the second
Uh,
floor is all us hoi polloi, sort of, yeah, living off the back of the rent that they pay upstairs. So it's, yeah, it's fantastic. So if you come to Sydney, look me up and we'll have a beer over
no,
there.
definitely. Go, go, for
So
sure.
listen, so let me
And a
just
few other
before
guys. I mean,
so yeah, there's a huge amount here. We have you probably know, we have an
you know,
annual
there's like,
old boys dinner.
yeah,
And we never get less than 30 to 40 guys every year,
uh, uh,
and mostly around our generation, actually, because in the 80s a lot of guys, when things were looking
yeah,
pretty hectic in South Africa, and a lot of guys left in the 80s, and that we were at that prime
yeah.
age, to migrate.
Mm,
So there's a big group of us. In fact, so
yeah.
73, 74 has even got a bigger representation. And I've been made an honorary member of the 74 class because they have an annual lunch in addition to the dinner. And
Uh,
they get about 20 guys to that. Maybe, no, maybe 15, but it's amazing. And they're really good. But what's really amazing about these things, these Zoom calls, is that you go to a reunion and you see all the guys and you say, how's it? And oh, look at you, and blah, blah, blah. And you have a
yeah.
conversation. Those conversations are typically short and superficial. But what's been
Mm,
happening with these things is that, we schedule half an hour. It rarely goes under an hour. And guys you can get really kind of deep down. And a lot of guys, we're all at that stage of life where and particularly because of the 50th anniversary, where we're kind of reflecting on looking back and seeing school in a more kind of in context of our lives. And a lot of guys, almost everybody likes to, we just reflect on that. And as we do that, of course, we disturb all the sediment and all the memories start coming back very, very vividly. So typically within, a very short time of starting these things, guys are remembering stuff that they haven't thought about for 60 years and remembering them really vividly. And like I had, like Percy, Percy's thing was fucking just amazing. The stories, his perspective on things, we saw Percy as the great sportsman, and he seemed to be living the life of Riley, but inside it was quite different for him, and he had his own disappointments and his own successes, and then same yesterday I had
and struggles
absolutely, and like
domestic particularly
also exactly. And then, yesterday I had a most amazing chat with Michael Romberg, who's had an amazingly interesting life. And also just his, again, because for me, Michael was one of the cool kids, and I always aspired to be like him. And then to hear of his own insecurities, and he was actually just like I was, and he had his own things that he thought, those guys, and Percy as well. Percy had exactly the same thing. And it's just amazing to hear, the guys talking and it's been amazing. So let's get this show on the road. So what we're going to do is, first of all, I'm going to talk as little as possible, and that's so that I don't interfere with the audio, because especially on Zoom, you can't have a real kind of, if I say something, it's a little bit of a delay, and you know what I mean. It interferes with a nice smooth narrative.
Yes.
My response in when we're talking is going to be visual mostly. I'm going to, I'll gesticulate and so on. Keep going, or or whatever. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we just want to start off at the same point that I start off with everybody, and that is just to say, so you came to SACS when? And from memory, you came in sub A. So we'll just start there, and what was it like? And you just start talking about it, and then we'll just go from there. And I'll make sure that we cover the sort of big, there are obviously certain topics that we want to just know about, and but we'll cover them as we go. But we'll sort of do it chronologically, and start at the very beginning. To quote Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music, a very good place to start. When you read, you begin with ABC. So, Chris, you started at SACS. When did you start at SACS, and what did it feel like when you first pitched up there? How did you experience it?
Well, Andrew, firstly, thanks for all the work that you've done to prepare this schedule of interviews. It means a lot to us. It's heartbreaking that they're not more of us who will be coming back to celebrate this this time of our lives. And I think that this is superficially, the danger here is that there's a concentration on SACS. The truth is that this is a concentration on us, and one's got to bear that in mind. And bear in mind all the way through this particular point in time. And this is a point in time, it's just another part of our journey. So those are, with that sort of, that's my sense of this occasion. And you've wonderfully given us the opportunity to not only share this memory, but to actually have it around. I had a mentor in recent times called Bongani Mayosi, who tragically died a few years ago. Bongani used to say to me that, he used to say to us, he was professor of medicine at University of Cape Town. And he used to say to us, look, listen, you know, nothing exists if it's not written. And that was his way of encouraging us to write and be academic and record events. And this is just another illustration of that. It's quite remarkable that in years to come, when some grandchild, you know, is reminded of Michael Romberg, they'll be able to go on media, on multimedia, and they'll be able to track, like, you know, occasionally someone turns up on YouTube vicariously. Michael Romberg's grandkids or great-grandkids, you know, will be able to see Michael, and not only see him, but listen to him talking about his life. And I think that's just such a terrific opportunity that we have here. You know, Andrew, so I'm just going to go on here. You know, our class left SACS 50 years ago. Needless to say, I think, you know, it's hard to comprehend half a century has like evaporated, when the memories of that time for me remain so powerful. And now in this, what are we? We're certainly in the autumn of our lives. For some of us, we're in the winter. And to get together with a group of friends like this, with whom we spend so much of our lives, is a privilege. I spent more waking hours with the boys with whom I started my 12 years at SACS than I did with my parents. And I lived at home. It's a very interesting equation, that, which I like to remind people of. It's hard to say who amongst us will have further opportunities to indulge ourselves in this way. We just don't know. I can speak for the local organizers that have got together: Graham Bellairs, David Atwell, Peter Erasmus, Charlie Simpson, and myself. We've been looking forward to this this occasion with wonder and some amazement. Some amazement are the tricky parts, and some responses that we've had, I refer to particularly. But we're very excited about this. The stories of our young lives at SACS, from what was sub-A through to matric, you know, those stories will be told over those 3 days in March, and wonderfully through the recordings that you've made. I'm not going to dwell too much on them now, actually, because my memories I've written of in quite elaborate detail in a letter that I wrote to Michael Canty, inspired by his work. But I have been thinking about our time quite a lot. Our parents' generation, Andrew, was without a question defined by the Second World War. You know, this generation of women and men who were steeped in service and sacrifice, albeit in a conflict now spoken of pejoratively as a white people's war. Millions of people who don't identify or who are not otherwise referenced as white, from Africa, India, Myanmar, the Philippines, Korea, Japan, fought and died in what was actually an Asian and a European war. So our parents' reality, for me, begged the question, you know, what are the issues that defined us as this cohort of boys, by and large, born in 1956, starting at SACS in 1962, and leaving, most of us, in 1973. Some guys from our class loved SACS so much that they stayed around a little longer. And in many ways, and in some ways, I envy them, because they got more, you know, than I did. So for me, Andrew, there are three things that I feel define us, and they are white privilege, the 60s, and the South African border war. My parents moved to Newlands so that my brother Richard and I could come to SACS. We lived along Newlands Avenue, in between the school and our house in Cannon Street, which was at the end of the Newlands village. It's now gentrified, as everybody knows, but this village, which was previously called Irish Town, was home to woodcutters in the commercial forests of Table Mountain, workers in the Olson's breweries, which was sited on the campus, on the SACS campus, then known as Papenboom. There were craftsmen, artisans, builders, tailors, shoemakers, people of color whose children in our generation would grow up to be teachers, lawyers, and other professionals. These families were forcibly removed under apartheid, just as people were from District 6. We lived as young children at SACS through the time of forced evictions with the relocation of this community, more entitled to be at a school in Newlands than we were. We were recent entrants, having moved there in 1962, and they'd been there for hundreds of years. We came to SACS and we enjoyed a fine and balanced world-class education in one of the most beautiful environments for a school anywhere in the world. And whilst black and colored parents were paying for schooling for their children, ours was for nothing. Remember those green stickers that we got when we were at school, demanding free education for all, which were distributed by NUSAS. And I was a beneficiary through my sister, who was at school who was at university from 1969. It's important for our generation to acknowledge this white privilege. And as we move forwards, never forget what was behind and learn from it. The second thing I would think very powerfully is obviously the fact that we coincidentally had our course through our school largely through the 60s. And it was a remarkable decade when young people took ownership of their world, this ghastly world that they'd inherited after the Second World War. I've mentioned Michael Caine, and I repeat again and recommend his brilliant documentary, My Generation, which starts with that wonderful song from The Who in 1965, which I won't try and sing because as you guys all know, I was a rather an appalling singer. This movie documentary brings together very well what was happening in design, art, fashion, music, counterculture in general, whilst we were young kids at school. The long hair, the braided jeans, the mini skirts, the flower power, all these things, might have been forgotten. But the remarkable music and the lyrics that went with it live on. And not just in our minds, but in libraries, in vinyl collections, which some of us still have. You might argue that we were a little young, actually, to really appreciate what was going on around us, especially for those of us who didn't have older siblings, which I happily did. But you can surely not deny the profound effect that the music, that the social revolution, that that global movement amongst young people for peace, and that newfound sexual freedom had on our lives as we then went through puberty and adolescence at high school, and then through adulthood at university. So that peace movement, supported by artists so familiar to us, like, from Bob Dylan, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young in America, and of course John Lennon, Yoko Ono so strongly in the UK, largely driven by protests against the United States of America's horrors in Vietnam, bring me to our own war, I speak of what's elsewhere called the Namibian War of Independence, or the Angolan Bush War. I suppose more commonly the South African Border War. That's never made sense to me, because ironically, that name suggests that the war was fought on our borders, but of course it wasn't fought on our borders. It was fought on the border between Southwest Africa and now Namibia, and Angola. And of course, as much as the nationalist government of the time wanted us to believe that Southwest Africa was part of our country, that was an illegal occupation, even by the time we were in high school. So you know, that was a war fought by our generation of forcibly conscripted white South African boys, fought mostly in Angola from 1967 to 1989. And according to the propaganda drivel of the day, we'll all remember it was to stop the spread of communism in Africa. Whereas in fact, excuse her, I love her very much.
Great. Right.
Hey. Come. Hey, stop. As you can see, I'm still at home. So let me just go back a little bit here so that we can so that you can edit some of this out. Just hold on, Andrew.
Okay, no worries.
All right, I'm just going to back up a little bit. Are we G for go? Okay, so what I was saying is that it's ironic that name's ironic, because the war wasn't fought on our borders at all, but it was fought on this border between South Africa, between Southwest Africa, now known as Namibia, and Angola. And it was fought by our generation of guys, conscripted white South African boys, who fought mostly in Angola, actually, between 1967 and 1989, a long time. According to the propaganda of that day, it was to stop communism in Africa. But in fact, it was about preserving the apartheid enterprise and arresting decolonization across Southern Africa. Conscription, that big word, being drafted into the defense force against your will, was something that did not sit comfortably with the majority of boys from my school, nor from my university. It was a bad thing. We knew it was a bad thing. We knew it would be bad for us, and we knew it would be bad for the people of South Africa. It was a horror show. And in contradistinction to the experience of our parents, nowhere is this spoken of as a just war. Nowhere. The mental anguish that this provoked at the time, and the legacy of guilt and shame that we carry, I don't think have been well interrogated or articulated by our soldiers. You know, we should have been soldiers for peace. That was our time. And instead we were subjected to all of this great horror. We're very lucky that David Atwell was in our class. David, as people know, is a wonderful English scholar, and he's emeritus professor at York. And at our assembly on the 3rd of March, I know that David is going to give his own retrospective on this complex subject, and I'm sure he'll do it he'll do it greater justice than I can do in this short time. One of our teachers, I think controversial in Standard 4, and was Andre Oosthuizen. And I remember he told us many times that those years would prove to be the best of our lives, and that we should remember that. They certainly were carefree. The schoolwork for me was tolerable, and there was so much fun to do besides. So much fun stuff to do besides all that. I'm aware that for some of the boys who are our dear school friends, their experience of SACS was painful, actually. Some of them harshly so. And I'd like to, at this point, acknowledge that and just respect that. I loved, actually, my school years. And I loved that cohort of boys that I grew up with. I loved those years, and I have a great affinity for SACS. But my strong connection with SACS through our foundation is not actually based on sentiment at all. It's because we recognize the importance of schools like SACS. SACS is a very, very important institution. Institutions like SACS and others, which offer this broad-based, value-driven, quality education to this increasingly diverse cohort of boys, is so important for this country. They are our best hope for the development of young and courageous leaders with integrity, sharp and critical minds, who stand up and fight the world's fight. Thank you, Andrew, for the opportunity to share that with you.
Fantastic. It's amazing, Chris, that you point out the privilege and sheer good fortune that we had, and point out rather eloquently the fact that it was built on in no small part, our presence there was built upon the fact that people were forcibly removed. And certainly where I lived in Boshoff Avenue near the Parliamentarian Sports Ground, there was a huge coloured community just towards Kirstenbosch. And we used to go and watch the guys play rugby on a field there, a very stuffed up field compared to what we had, until about 1966, when they were all, within months, moved out to the Cape Flats. So I was very, very aware of that. But what I wanted to just tell you is that this is the 23rd interview I'm doing. And in almost every single one, without any prompting from me, the guys mention this extraordinary privilege that we had and our good fortune in getting it. Mm. So everyone is mindful of that. And that's remarkable, because once you know that you're privileged, you know that you're lucky, you can see it. You can't unsee it. And it's very hard to go from that to being entitled. And entitlement is something that sadly I see here in Australia among the majority of the cohort of South Africans who left and came here. They brought with them, I'm afraid, I'm generalizing, but it's true, and I'll tell you why. They brought with them a sense of entitlement, and they have a reputation here for being entitled. So much so that the Aussies tell a joke about the McDonald's in Bondi Beach. There's so many South Africans here now in Dover Heights that the McDonald's in Bondi Beach has introduced a new meal, especially for the South African market. It's called the Never Bloody Happy Meal. And it's extraordinary that SACS men have escaped that. And I said, to a man, they bring it. I've never prompted anybody to bring that up or to talk about it, but everyone brings it up spontaneously. There's something about that I find. I haven't got any theories. I'm letting the guys talk for themselves, and we'll at the end we'll get an amalgam of that, which will probably be representative. But it is something that really stood out for me in these things, is that awareness of how lucky we were.
Mm.
So,
yeah, we were, and I like the way you juxtapose that privilege and entitlement, and I think that's a very astute observation. We're still surrounded here by people who are rich and entitled, and they don't. You're right. They haven't ingested their privilege, and that's why they're still where they are. And with that failure to ingest their privilege, recognize it, accept it, acknowledge it, speak of it, they've remained ideologically sort of paralyzed, sadly. So the other thing you mentioned, where you were in Boshoff Avenue, that was a very interesting community as well. They were, that was just another farm. Boshoff was just another farm. As you moved from SACS, which was built on Papenboom, later called Montebello, but it was originally Papenboom. Then there was Het Nieuwelanden, which became the suburb of Newlands. That was originally settled, just occupied. The land was occupied by Simon van der Stel. That Newlands, essentially from Papenboom Road through to Paradise Road. And then on the other side, of course, was Hidding, and then the Boshoff. These were just farms in a row on the beautiful Table Mountain side. I spoke at a prize giving, SACS prize giving in 2016, and I spoke on this subject because I felt compelled to. And afterwards there was a tea, and a number of people obviously came up to me and spoke to me about what I'd said. And this middle-aged woman in a hijab she came up to me and she said, Dr. Hugo-Hamman, I grew up in Kirstenbosch village. I lived in one of those 3 stone houses that you still recognize when you drive past Kirstenbosch. They're the only 3 remaining. But there was a thriving village there, and she said I grew up there, and but I didn't grow up very long because we were evicted as a family, and I think she said that she was about a year of age or something, and she now had a boy at SACS. And she said to me how much she had valued what I had said, particularly as it was coming from a white man. And she was tearful when she acknowledged this, and so was I. It was so affirming. Not of my truth, but of the truth. Sorry, very emotional. There's a lot of emotion going around at this time.
You're not the first. That's a wonderful story. Really is.
Yeah.
Um,
Of course, she is like I've mentioned already. You know, she's grown up and she's a lawyer. You know, and she was moved to a lot of the people from the villages in Newlands were moved to Manenberg, Bonteheuvel, Mandalay, and she grew up in Mandalay. You know, and is now a professional like us and like her parents' generation ought to have been and would have been if circumstances had been different.
it's so interesting that she
Andrew, so
it's so interesting
what's
that
that?
it's interesting that she chose to send her son to SACS.
It is, and you know that's something that we've looked at quite closely is how do you get people from people of different colors to send boys to SACS. And if you look at the and we've looked closely at the demographic and tried to socially engineer a different school that becomes more attractive to families who identify as Black. SACS has been appealing to colored people and Malay people for some time. And so the demographic has shifted substantially. But not yet to Black families. And that's starting now. We've got we support we fund 13 boys, Black boys, to attend SACS, one in each class. We started that 6 years ago. So there's a momentum, and that's that and the initiatives of others are now finally changing, so that families, Black families, like Mrs. Khan, who started sending her kids to SACS, it must be 15 years ago now, will now start to recognize that there's a comfortable cohort of similar people at the school, which means that the school has changed and is therefore welcoming. You know, I've tried to imagine so often going to a school where everyone's white and there are 5 Black boys. Am I going to send my child to that school? It's quite an interesting question, because, you know, one of the most remarkable schools in the world is Eton. Now, I would never, I've got friends that have sent their kids to Eton for God knows what reason, and I would never send my child to Eton. However, Eton's very interesting in two ways. One is that rich kids from other parts of the world have been sent to Eton for decades, despite that fact that they're in such a minority at Eton. And that contradicts what I've just said. The other thing that's interesting about Eton is that if you look at their they have a 10-year strategic plan, and I can't remember when it started and when it's meant to climax, but they have written that by 2030 They want 60% of the boys at Eton to be on scholarships. Now that's profound. That's profound social engineering. You know, that school by 2030 will be recognizable in the sense that the buildings are the same and the young boys still go around in daft uniforms. But the substance of the school, which is the boys, will have changed dramatically. And in a small way, that's starting to happen at SACS.
It's funny you mentioned Eton because, you know, going back to what we were talking about earlier about privilege and the recognition of privilege and therefore the absence of entitlement. Because to me, and on my limited knowledge, if you asked me to give you a school that epitomized entitlement, I'd say Eton. And maybe obviously, you know, that's colored by, you know, Boris Johnson and that mob and what they got up to and how they would at Eton go and, or was it Eton or was it at Oxford where they used to go and trash restaurants and that sort of thing? Probably Oxford actually. And so it's interesting that whether that change in the demographic of makeup of the student body will have an effect on that part of it, because Eton is the school of the ruling class in England. I mean, that's how it perpetuates itself. That's why it produces all the prime ministers, etc., etc. So, and that ruling class in England certainly has a. I think they invented entitlement.
Yes,
and they certainly epitomize it. And so I'm wondering, you know, for me, when you talk about SACS broadening its demographic and that, it makes perfect sense. And one of the things that I think will probably remain constant as that change occurs is the values that you refer to right at the beginning when when you started this interview. You spoke about values-based education, and that's a really nice way of putting that same that same idea of being privileged, but being aware of your privilege, and then being empowered to actually do good things with your privilege. Yeah. And so, and that value, I'm assuming, is still there. That's why you're still involved in the school, and that value will be perpetuated. That's the thing that we want to preserve about SACS, is that thing, I should imagine. And in changing the demographic, you'd keep that, and that's what would attract the people, right? So for me, then, sort of looking at the Eton one, I mean, it's nothing to do with SACS, but it just made me think. They'd have to have a cultural transplant to begin down that path. You know, I mean, almost you could almost, if you were cynical, and I must admit to a bit of that now. My cynical side says, well, you know, what they're doing is they're trying to broaden the base for the ruling class. You know, they don't want to change anything, but they want to bring more people in to make a more diverse representation of the same old thing. You know, same like the Blacks and the Tory party and all that stuff. Anyway, it's
well, I think that the key there is that maybe, and I mean, look, I don't carry a candle for Eton by any means, but I do for SACS. But the key to change is actually where you draw your cohort from. So as long as you continue to draw boys and girls from the uber rich families, doesn't matter how they get to the school, nothing's going to change. But if you draw boys and girls from poor marginalized communities and put them into the school, then you've got a solid prospect for change. Because they don't come from entitled families by any means. They come with a totally different set of values is the wrong word. They come with a different reality. They come with a totally different understanding of hardship. They parachuted into a privileged environment. That's true. But their capacity, I would say, their capacity to appreciate their situation is very, very different. And you see, that's what I was alluding to when I spoke earlier, is that when we were, I probably wanted to talk about it a bit more, but when we were at school, you know, as we were going through the junior school, we were actually too young to recognize it. I think we were developing the capacity to recognize injustice, particularly around Newlands Village and Boshoff Village when people were moved out. I think we knew, even as kids at the junior school, that there was something deeply wrong about that. But I don't think our brains had well developed in order to really taste that bitterness that was around us. But if you come to the school from a community that tastes that bitterness and anger every day, I think the reality of your experience at the institution is different. And you know, we've got feedback from matriculants leaving SACS who have told the story to us. So that's also been very affirming.
What's the story?
What's the story? No, it's the story of coming from a very disadvantaged background and being at SACS and being a boy of color and not having the capacity to really not having the ability to engage socially in ways that all these boys around them do. So I'll give you an example. So, you know, these boys come along, they go to high school, and everything's paid for. Boarding school's paid for, food is paid for, you know, extra lessons paid for, school fees and so on. So that is a full package. But when they walked out of school down to Newlands Village to go and do some shopping, maybe go for a bite to eat at Barristers, there's no money in their pocket. And there's no credit card. And once again, the baggage of their own history and disadvantage manifests in the flash of an eye. So even though they are, you know, exported, as it were, into this wonderful environment, every day there are reminders of what they aren't. And it's those kinds of lessons that we're hearing from these boys, you know, as they leave school. We've just had 2 matriculants graduate now with nice matric passes, both going to university. One going to UCT and the other one going to UWC. The one guy's going to do social sciences and the other one's going to do accounting. And the nice, I mean, you know, many they've taught us a lot. But the nice thing that we've heard, that one of the very gratifying things that we hear from them, you know, is their appreciation of where they've been, their talk about the values, that value-based education that they've had, and just this enormous appreciation for the opportunity that they've had to come to a school like SACS.
What values do they talk about?
Yeah, Andrew. The values, they talk about, you know, we've had 3 boys who've gone through matric now. So when I talk, I'm not just talking about them, but I'm talking about, I suppose, about the senior group of boys who've begun to kind of, you know, think about stuff like this. And the things that that they talk about are honesty. They talk about friendship, very powerfully, very, very powerfully. And I'll come back to that. They talk about, in their own way, they're trying to talk about integrity. They don't all use that word, but they take a sentence or two to describe what integrity is, and it's that they're talking about. And one or two of them have spoken about this subconscious, this culture of commitment to make a difference. And how do you get that? You know, where does that come from? And that's come subtly through the experience that they're currently having. And a number of them, you know, even though they come from such disadvantaged backgrounds, you know, it's quite remarkable what's going on at SACS. You know, a number of them are themselves already actively engaged in giving back in their own ways. Friendship. I'll come back to that. And it comes back to the way that I started my soliloquy. They've said, you know, we live at SACS. SACS has been our life. All my friends are at SACS. My family lives in Langa. But I'm a SACS boy, and these friends that I have now, these are going to be my friends. And you know, put yourself in that environment, in that space for a moment. You know, you know, that's what it is, day and night at SACS. Rosedale, Michaela's house, Rosedale. They stay there for weekends because they have such a great time. It's safe and secure. It's safe and secure. Things we just took for granted. They are safe and secure there. No one's going to walk in, steal. No one's going to walk in and abuse them or abuse their mother. These are so, you know, such important things. And they, you know, all of them, this most recent group, you know, and I don't know whether this is a good or a bad thing. We will interrogate it in due course, you know, but they don't want to live at home. You know, they don't want to live at home. They want to. They've said, you know, we left home 5 years ago, and we've left home, which is intriguing.
What do they do in the holidays?
Well, these particular guys, these two, well, you know, nothing.
No, school holidays. Where do they live? You said they
except-
don't go home, but that's presumably during term time. When school holidays,
Yeah.
where do they live?
Well, these, you know, the boarding house closes over the long summer holiday, so they've gone home. So, you know, they're sharing space with family. You know.
Do they talk about that experience of being there and then going back to SACS? Do they talk about that?
In one of these boys is sharing a bed with his sister during the summer. You know, he's 19 years old and he's sharing a bed with his younger sister. Now, how you know, how bad is that? of course, in the broader, with broader perspective, he's very lucky to be on a bed. I guess you could, many people who maybe haven't transcended their own entitlement would probably say things like that, but it's a ghastly scenario, actually.
Geez, that's so interesting. And by friendship, you and that strong presence of that in the narrative, it shows that they feel completely at home in the SACS environment. They don't see themselves as being of color, or they don't see. Is that a fair comment, or?
I think that's by and large a fair comment. I think that there are times when maybe when they go shopping at maybe when they do that restaurant thing, there are times when they get harsh reminders of their own family reality. I'm sure that happens, but I think the point that you're making, or the question that you're asking, really is, how comfortable are they in that white space, or in that it's a 50-50 now. How comfortable are they in that space, and how warmly do they feel they're regarded? And they've got no anxieties about that I've heard, I must say. I'm not, we've got we've got a good relationship with these guys, and they speak to us quite freely. I think that's easy to say when you're 66 years old. You don't, but it's, one's able to have a conversation with a guy of 19 if you've been mentoring him for 5 or 6 years. Then it's not, you're not coming in fresh. So I think they do open up.
Sure.
But
the fact that they've volunteered as a benefit, if you like, or something that they've brought that up, and they talk about friendship, but I mean, what they really mean is acceptance. You won't talk about an environment and remark on the friends that you've made, and that if you didn't feel that you were part of that environment, you wouldn't. You know what I mean?
Quite.
I think you would. I can't see it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree.
That's incredible. That's great. Because I mean, it won't surprise you to find out that a few of the guys in our year felt at a disadvantage on a socioeconomic level, and a few of them have said, all us rich kids who were, lived in the area, we were brought to school, those are the rich kids, and they were trekking in from, Sikuflay or whatever, and that they certainly were aware of that difference. They didn't feel excluded, and they didn't think that the rich kids, which is you and me, that we in any way treated them differently, but they were themselves aware of that difference, and it often would have an impact on their lives because, for example, doing sport or doing drama, particularly some of those things, that extramural stuff that required you to be at school, late, they couldn't do that. And so some of them were, I'm going to say it wasn't a negative for them, but it was just simply a thing that was, and they were aware of it. And it's interesting that, obviously your kids, those kids are going to be hyper aware of it, but they both have seemed to, even across the 50 years, have neither of them felt alienated or not part of it. However, that said, I must tell you, just going back to something that you alluded to earlier about the guys who were perhaps had a negative experience. Not a lot, but there were a number who I sent out these emails, and one of the last line was, if you don't want to be part of the project, just click here and you're off the list. And I was interested to see the names that came up with they're so predictable. The
Really?
people who unsubscribed straight away. One guy in particular in my class who I think he was bullied badly, and it's a pity that those guys are not going to be on this. Well, not so far. I haven't sort of really tried to work on any of them, but I think it'll be really good if we could, if I can get some of them to, even just have just to participate a bit.
Andrew, this guy that was bullied in your class, was he bullied by other boys in the class, or was he bullied by teachers?
No, other boys in the class. And I felt terrible about it, because although I wasn't a direct bully, I was complicit to the extent that I was in a position to defend him or take some action, and I didn't. And I'm aware of that guilt now. And when his name popped up on that, on like almost immediately, he didn't pitch up for the class photograph either. So
is that right?
Yeah, it's a bit sad.
Sure.
And then a few others that I wasn't that. I mean, like, look, I'll just tell you. I won't put this in the video, but it was David McIntyre, and
shame.
But also some guys, Robin Shuttleworth straight away doesn't want to have anything to do with it. Bernard Roos, which I was surprised at. Who else?
That is a surprise.
Yeah.
Particularly as Bernard wrote a year ago and said he's going to come to the reunion, and he wrote about 3 times.
Yeah. So maybe I'll get in touch with him direct and just see. Maybe it was just, some guys feel that they won't be comfortable, won't be articulate, whatever. But oh God, I don't want to stick my neck out. And also, I think a lot of guys think it's going to be a rah-rah session, and of course it's anything but. And so maybe maybe I'll have another go with them. Fuck, that's amazing. But now, Chris, we haven't done anything about you. Well, I want to just put in a little bit about, just talk a little bit about what happened, in your career wise. So you finished school, and then here's Chris. He's finished school. He's finished matric. What's he going to do with his ass? Just a brief overview of the key highlights, if you like.
Yeah, well, I thought what I plan to do is to talk at the on that Saturday morning session.
Mm-hmm.
We've got this online. We're doing this Zoom call. It's going to be a Teams call, actually, Andrew, not a Zoom call, because the school is on Teams.
That's okay.
But the school has offered us a facility. They've offered us all the AV. So I think you're aware of this, that we're having a live meeting on the Saturday morning, the 4th,
right,
which will be at 9 o'clock.
In my as I slip into my dotage, I'm not that observant, but I have become aware of that in the last few days. So yeah.
All right. So I plan to do some reflecting on that, but for the purposes of
that's fine. That's what you want to cover. It's if there's just other stuff that you want to talk about here, that's cool. And listen, by the way,
well, no,
unique contribution.
I'm not going to.
This contribution is fantastic, because it's given the wonderful thing about it is all these reflections give make it more granular, make the whole thing sort of other people's perspectives, just makes the thing so much richer. But what you provided is yet a perspective that's absolutely unique, and is so it informs, you're talking about now, but it informs our days as well, as we've sort of. Sorry, I'm not really being very articulate at the moment, but what I'm just saying is that was fucking amazing. That material that you've just done is fucking interesting, and it's wow. Thank you,
Andrew. Let me just speak to your question about yourself, because I'm not going to dwell on this actually on the Saturday morning. Mm-hmm. But I was one of the so, you know, I left SACS and I went to UCT like you did, and I did medicine, and I was a very poor student on one hand because I didn't work very much, but I was a very good student on the other hand because I got involved in everything. You know, I saw there was this when I went to university and I got through my first year was quite a difficult year. I felt the absence of rigor, structure in my life, quite awkward, coming from school where there was always, you know, at school there was always someone telling you what to do, where to go, where to stand, how long to grow your hair, and I found that the transition to university in my first 6 months very difficult. But once I'd got through that, you know, I just saw around me this smorgasbord of people and opportunity. And so I was a very good student in the sense that I did as much as I could. You know, I played sports. I got involved in student politics. I got involved in Shawco. I got involved in leadership, and but my studies just went to hell. You know, I managed to get through every year by hook or by crook, and I managed to finish in 1979. So along with some other guys from our class, and but in 1979, you know, I became one of the most privileged SACS boys when I was awarded a Rhodes Scholarship. So I am the luckiest guy from our class. I can tell you that, and I'm happy to acknowledge that. So I did my internship, and then I went off to Oxford. I was going to. It had been my intention, and it had been my two mentors had advised me, and I think they advised me probably correctly. They advised me to do a PhD when I went to Oxford, but I was way too immature. Way too immature. I mean, you know, I had no idea of what a PhD entailed, and I had even less capacity to do it. So I did what I wanted to do. Actually, what I'd always wanted to do was to get an education. Medicine is, you know, studying medicine is not an education. Studying, you know, it's vocational training. So when I was at Oxford, I did a PPE, philosophy, politics, economics. So I came as a trained person at the age of 25, now needing to think, develop ideas, engage with abstract thought, which was completely alien to me. I mean, I hadn't had that at school. I couldn't write at school. It was a real challenge, you know. So anyhow, I did a PPE, which is that degree that most British prime ministers have, including Boris Johnson and the woman who didn't last as long as a lettuce leaf. She also did a PPE. So I had 3 years at Oxford. I graduated, and then I had a really difficult choice. You know, many people, 50% of South Africans who've got a Rhodes Scholarship, it's the figure 60% actually, have used the scholarship as a ticket out of South Africa. And in 1983, I could have cashed in that ticket at the drop of a hat. But I decided in my first year at Oxford, I realized a few things. I realized what I'm not, and I realized what I was. I realized I was not British. And there was no way, despite my English education and the fact that I identified at that time as an English-speaking South African, I was not flipping English, you know. And we realized that we were just South African, and that the values and the culture of this country are what appeal to us. So we decided there and then to come home. Of course, that was a tricky time, because this war that I'd spoken of was only beginning to gain momentum, in 1983, and the worst years were coming. And I had to make a choice, and my choice was to go to prison, or to actually go into the army, to go into the Defence Force. The prison was not a compelling idea. I'd already had my oldest kid, had Chloe. We'd already had Chloe, so I chose national service. I didn't choose prison, which was probably another incorrect choice, as you tell the story of your life. But nonetheless, I did. So at the age of 28, I started national service. With 17 and 18-year-olds. That was quite a thing. I did 2 years. I was lucky that I was a doctor, of course, even though I had swayed into politics and economics. I could go into the Defence Force as a doctor. So I was cocooned from a lot. I refused to go. I refused to participate in that border war. So I was. I'm not one of those wounded people, but I did those 2 years. Then I was at another, critical juncture in my life, what to do now. I dare say if South Africa had been a different country, I would have probably made a different choice. But the choice I made was to stay with medicine. So I came back to UCT and I specialized as a pediatrician. And then after that, I specialized further in cardiology. So I ended up a pediatric cardiologist. But in 1993, from about 1992 to 93, I realized I was an academic then, being paid as a lecturer and working at the hospitals. I realized I had to do something in my life, because I was going nowhere financially, and so I just had to do something. Anyhow, I applied for a lot of stuff. I got several job offers in the United States, but the job offer that I chose was to become a health attaché for South Africa. So I switched from the practice of medicine into public health, and I went with my family, which was now 5 of us. We went to Brussels, and we lived in Brussels for 4 years. And there I worked with the European Commission mostly, all representing South Africa in the early days, 94 to 97. I then came back I came back in 97, and I tried to work for our health minister, whose name was Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. That didn't work out well for me or her. So I left the ministry in 98. And once again, I was at this sort of crossroads in my life. What now? What do I do now? I've sort of skilled myself. I've got this broad set of skills, and I'm torn between public health and clinical medicine. I'm torn between diplomacy and politics and medicine, and So at 40 or 41, I made what was a big decision, and that was to go back into clinical medicine. So since 1999, I've been in clinical medicine. I've done a few things which have been quite exciting in that time. I was asked to go and and this is quite curious, I was asked to develop a service in Namibia, of all places. I'm now going back to what I said earlier. And Namibia, this was 2017, and Namibia at that time had no service for children or adults with heart problems. And myself and nothing. They had no capacity to deal with people with heart disease. So a surgeon friend of mine and we went off to Namibia, and I'm in my 15th year of service in Namibia. My service now is very part-time, but I had a 10-year service where it was either full-time or virtually full-time. I commuted. So I ended up going to this country, having not wanted to go to, not wanting to go near it in the tough time in the 80s. I've ended up spending a hell of a lot of time there, and hopefully making a difference. That's my story.
Amazing story, amazing. So now, as Chris Hugo-Hamman, as you put it earlier, I'm sure you're in the autumn, not in the winter of your years. And so what now? Are you still working? I mean, a lot of the guys are talking about retirement and what it means, and whether they want to, whether they don't want to. It's kind of a moment for a lot of us. Where are you in that moment?
Yeah. Look, I'm working as a pediatric cardiologist and a part-time academic. I'm working probably 50% of that working day. My working day used to be 7 to 6. I'm now working less than half that. I work probably 50% of a normal working day. I probably do 4 hours a day, 4, maybe 5 hours. And that suits me fine. And this has been for the last 4 years. I left Namibia full time at the end of 2018. So I've got a very good life. I think it's a very balanced life. I do some work, so I'm still enthusiastic about that. I'm also still earning money, which I need to for a while longer. But I've got time for other stuff, So my health at the moment is not very good, but my health has actually been very good. So having this time, I still swim. I enjoy swimming. I enjoy swimming more than I did when I was at school, actually. I train every morning. I swim 6 times a week, and we do a big distance. So that's still a big part of my life. And so that 50% working now becomes if I add the swimming, that's probably 60% of my time. And I'm engaged with a lot of other stuff. I'm engaged with our foundation. So I must say the 40% of time that's meant to be idle, I have no problem filling that, and I'm not in a hurry to make any change. I've got a plot in the Karoo, and I've got 160 olive trees now. So I've started to press my own olive oil, and so I'm having fun. And I think I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. Actually, I do think that when doctors get to the age of, there comes a time where you shouldn't be practicing clinical medicine, and I'm still, pediatric cardiology it's pretty high end on the life and death question. So there are many aspects. You can do many things in medicine, and many of them are not at that cutting edge of life and death, but pediatric cardiology is. So I think that that nuanced touch that you need, that I need. I think to be safe, 70 is the limit. So that's my plan. Continue doing what I am, but at 70, stop practicing clinical medicine. There's still a lot that one can do in medicine. I'm still engaged in teaching, and I'm still engaged in research, so I can keep that stuff going. But certainly I'll stop the clinical medicine, which means I'll stop earning. Which is it's that scenario that there are some guys from our class who don't have to work for a living anymore, but I'm not one of those lucky ones.
Yeah, I spoke to Warren Frost the other day. He's one. So
is he really?
So just I'm sorry to hear your health is not so good.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm fine today, but I've had, guys our age get atrial fibrillation, where your heart rhythm starts to mess around and so on. And I've had that for 2 years, and it hasn't really bothered me. I mean, I swam Robben Island last year, so I'm still good. But I decide. But in the long term, atrial fibrillation is not good for you. There's a high risk of stroke, and there's a high risk of cardiac failure as you go on. So I finally took the advice and had a treatment 3 weeks ago, and that treatment is called an ablation. They put a catheter into your heart, and they cauterize basically the area of your heart that is causing this abnormal electrical activity. Mm-hmm. And that rocked me. That absolutely rocked me. And I had some bad side effects. So, but I'll get through that.
Has the treatment been successful, do you think?
Oh, it's taken me out of atrial fibrillation, which is what it intended to do. But they were also hoping. I've got a very slow resting heart rate, very slow, which is partly swimming, but it's also partly abnormality. Oh. So my resting heart rate before this procedure was 32. 32 beats a minute. Well, normal for me is 40, but 32 is a bit dramatic. So what this procedure hasn't done is get my heart rate up. Right. So I'll probably end up with a pacemaker this year, maybe this month actually. Okay. So I've got a bit of a journey to go there.
Yeah,
but that's the health issue. But if you compare that to with what some other guys are going through, and women going through at our age, I feel a bit of a fraud actually even complaining about it.
It's I think that you'll know as a doctor, one of the biggest killers of men is failure to actually engage with their health. And so yeah, hats off to you. That
yeah. But if you haven't had a finger up your bum, go and get it quickly.
I had a prostatectomy in 2011, a radical prostatectomy.
Is that right?
Great. Now I had the best guy, and he was just robotic. What do you call it?
Yeah.
Laparoscopic.
Yeah.
I've got full function back. I'm not incontinent, and I've got pretty much full erectile function now. I mean, it took a long time, but
I'm very happy to hear that.
Amazing. It's just incredible. This guy, he just left. It took a long time. It took about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years to sort of settle, and then you got to sort of work with the new parameters and whatever. So yeah, and then I talk about the health. And then I had Barrett's esophagus, which was my mother had esophageal cancer, and I got Barrett's, which is and anyway, but that's now under control. It's all good, and you'll be pleased to know, in July I was diagnosed. I was really overweight. Yep, I mean, seriously, I had my BMI was 32.7, and in July my doctor read me the Riot Act. And he basically said, you're going to make a choice today, and you're going to go 1 of 2 paths. And he described the 2 paths, and I could, well, I'll have that one. So now I'm down to 83. So my BMI is now 25, and
very good.
It's changed my life. Changed my life completely. I can't believe it. Do you know something?
No, Andrew.
Yeah, go.
Who were you talking about had esophageal cancer?
My mother.
Your mom. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that's why when I got Barrett's, it was a bit of alarm. But in fact, with my weight loss, everything's got better, including the Barrett's. So
amazing. I'm glad. So when you were, I got a little story. I've got a friend who he lives here, and he had he was he was a close friend when I was at varsity, at school in varsity. And he had a prostatectomy last year, 2022, and so he said to me, I was asking him how things going, and obviously when a guy asks a guy who's had a prostatectomy how things are going, you're obviously not asking the question, can you piss?
Yeah.
You're asking the question, can you get a hard on? So that's that's the unwritten, that's the unspoken word. Yeah. So I said, how are things going? And he said, well, no, it's going, things are going all right now. And he said, someone suggested that I should try Viagra. And I did. And Esme's his wife. And Esme said to me, Tony, what's that? What happened? And he said, well, I got some of this pill. And she said, Tony, you must go out and get some more. So I said to him, look, Tony, this is a very sweet story, and I love the idea. And if you ever need a prescription for Viagra, just ask me, I'll help you. But what I don't understand, actually, is how a guy can get to 65 years old and he's never heard of Viagra. I don't understand.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's impossible.
Oh, absolutely. I was in my mid-50s when I was diagnosed, 54 when I was diagnosed. So for me, it wasn't yet on the horizon, it wasn't yet part of I was too young. Of course, as you know, the downside of being diagnosed young is that the cancer is usually more aggressive. And mine certainly.
Yes.
But yeah, your friends is very, it's very funny. Very funny. Shame, eh? Wow. Wow, Chris.
Go out and get some more.
Absolutely brilliant. Now, we should wrap up, but just a couple of things. If you think of anything that you would like to have covered, or you want to revise or anything, just make another booking. There's no, just do it. Rather do it than not do it, and don't regret it afterwards. You know what I mean? So just do it. Yeah. The other thing is that sorry. Okay. So the other thing is that how are we going to do this? So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to put together the short video for the night, just the guys who can't be there saying how's it and that kind of thing. But then this rest of this material is just like gold. And so I'm going to pull to in fact, what it's going to look like at the end is changing all the time as the material comes in, But probably what it'll be I'm going to try and get one like doco length overview with lots of guys talking about their experience and pulling it together in some sort of overarching narrative, which with the guys will come from the guys, that doco style where you sort of the people they ask questions, the people just talk.
Yes.
Then also I'm going to, as you also alluded to early, that put probably on YouTube a private channel together where there's the main movie, but then all the guys have their own stories. So you can go and see, what did Michael Romberg have to say, get a little bit more about, other guys can come and listen to you. And obviously it'll be an edited version of this. I'm not going to put the whole thing on. But what I wanted to say was that I will send you all the bits that I'm going to use beforehand, and you've got the complete right of veto over anything. So nothing will go in there that what you don't approve of. If you want to, don't hesitate to make another booking if you feel that way inclined. I might come back to you.
Thanks so much.
I might come back to you when I'm putting it together, because there may be sometimes there may be a technical thing that's gone wrong, and something you said, maybe needs to be resaid. But it's not likely, but I just thought I'd flag that possibility. But that'll be down the track. And then
okay,
I should, as a separate thing, find out more about your live setup on Teams. Just see
yes. So look,
who's doing
Andrew,
that?
Let's just talk about that now.
Okay.
So we've advertised this for a long time, and so the message that I'm getting very strongly from you as a very engaged person is that we've articulated this idea very badly. So what we've had in mind is that on the Saturday morning we'll assemble in the lecture theatre at SACS. There's a new lecture theatre there. Well, it's quite old now, but it wasn't there when we were there. It's an auditorium, elevated, and they've got all the modern AV, so it's all very, very well equipped. So we thought that we plan, and we are going to get together with whoever wants to come along, whoever's in Cape Town wants to come along, and invite people, like you have invited people. Invite people to give a 10-minute, 7 to 10 minutes, depending on how many volunteers we have, to talk about something. They can talk about their life, or they can talk about, geraniums. It doesn't actually matter. And have some fun in that way, and do something substantive, rather than just, what are you doing? Where do you live? How many kids have you got? Where are they? That conversation, you can have 50 times at a reunion like this. So we thought we'd want to do something and give people an opportunity to actually say something substantively, something more meaningful. Yeah. So we're doing that, and we thought that it would be nice to be able to broadcast that, so that the bigger audience overseas would be able to plug in and not only listen to what was being said, but if they wanted to actually do a similar thing themselves and talk for 5 or 7 minutes, they would be welcome to do that. So we are geared up for that.
Okay.
The school is doing the setup for us on I think it's called Teams. Yeah. They're doing the setup. They're doing all the management of it, and we're going ahead with it.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So
we must get that message out in a different form. Yeah. We've decided that so David Atwell has actually taken this on as his project.
Okay.
And David's going to the format will be that David will chair the session, and in that way just keep things going, introduce new speakers, whether they're from San Francisco or from Newlands. So hopefully that'll be
that's how I heard about it. Now you remind me. Dave Atwell sent me an email the other day saying he was sick with COVID. He couldn't come on to do the recording now, but and then he said he's chairing this session, and he in a way that he assumed I knew about it, but he certainly mentioned that he would be chairing that live session, and I went, oh, right. It's that. But I mean, listen, I wouldn't take too much note of mine, the fact that I didn't, I missed it, because I miss a lot, So
No,
also,
no, how on earth, Andrew? Just we've spoken about me. We haven't spoken about you. This project is taking an enormous amount of your time. Are you still working?
Yeah, absolutely. But it is just the most rewarding thing that I've done for fucking decades. It's
Really?
oh man, I'm doing about sometimes one. I've got two today. I had one yesterday. I had three the day before. So they're spread out, and but it's just, I mean, you can see, it's just amazing. And so my rewards are already bountiful and already being delivered. But putting it together is going to be such a fun. I'm really looking forward to it. And obviously the main movie won't be out for the the reunion. I can't do this by March. It'll be quite a
No, of course not.
quite a lot of work. But it's an old story. If you enjoy what you do, it's not work. It's just such an amazing
well, it's a brilliant
project.
thing, man.
I'm loving it.
Brilliant.
The reason I came up with it is because I was so upset that I couldn't go. And the reason I can't go is because I'm working with my son, and he's I've always been in advertising and marketing, and I'm quite digitally. My son's setting up a digital marketing agency, and I'm sort of helping him, mentoring him. I'm the sort of like the chairman. They wheel me in when they need gravitas, and then all these young guys do stuff. I'm having an absolute ball with that. But it's right now, it's a really, really critical time. And, I can't take 2 weeks to go fucking anywhere. So I was really upset about that. And that's where the idea came from. And that's where it's grown, So if I can't go and take out the 2 weeks, I'll rather put the 2 weeks into spread it out and do this thing. It's just been amazing. So, yeah.
Well, it's brilliant.
Graham Boxall's about to, in about 20 minutes, I'm online with Graham Boxall. I've already done his interview, but now he's going to do mine. So we're reversing the roles.
Good.
And he's going to do,
so good. I was going to ask you. Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
I thought of you. I thought of you last night. We went to a Sting concert last night. And he's 71. He looks probably 60. He's in fantastic shape. And it's just so wonderful to see an artist who's got to the age in life where he's totally at peace with what he does. He's not trying. He doesn't have to prove anything anymore. He's got this songbook, which he's not embarrassed to play. Bob Dylan went through a big period in his midlife where he was embarrassed to perform songs that he'd performed in the way that he'd performed them. So he continually felt this need to reinvent his music. So, you would listen to Bob Dylan songs that were now unrecognizable because he was continually trying to reinvent them. Sting just reveled last night in his library, in the library of his life,
Wow.
And it was outstanding, absolutely outstanding. One of the guys in the band had a David Bowie t-shirt with David Bowie, Ziggy Stardust 1972 on his t-shirt. So then I was reminded of you as Aladdin Sane or something. We had some crazy party in 1974. So I think of you at strange times.
I remember you at that party. It was the end of 73, just before we started matric exams, and it was in that last little time. And you and you had an Aladdin Sane. You wore an Aladdin Sane costume with the flash and everything.
Yes, that's right.
And Mike Canty came in a box. We drank out the most amazing amount of beer that night. fuck, it was a great party. It was at my mother's house. Yeah,
I think it was that night when I got pancreatitis.
probably. Shit, Chris, this has been fantastic. I better go and get the Vauxhall.
Yeah, good.
Fantastic, mate. Really.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'll be in touch.
Okay. All right, Andrew. Keep
Thanks,
well, eh?
all
Ciao.
the best. Bye.